In this section, I'm going to talk about 4-7 Commando and then wrap up the operation with 4-1 Commando's operations in the following days. The 4-7 Commando, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel C.F. Phillips, began to land shortly after 12:30. He felt that he should have been called in earlier as a reserve commando, and that had that been the case, they would not have had so many problems because our SSEF was still active at that time and the gap was still under fire. When he went in, SSEF was spent and Whiskey 15 still in action. Obstacles were submerged and the tide was running strongly through the gap, making movement for weasels in particular very difficult. Although some of the LCT were hit on the run-in, 17 of the 20 buffaloes got ashore, but only 3 of the 20 weasels made it ashore, and all the wireless weasels were lost. The commando spent the rest of the day reorganizing in the area of the radar station. They hadn't suffered badly, and most of the troops were near full strength, apart from B Troop, who were down to 30 men. They were reinforced with a Dutch troop from 10 Commando, but there was no FOB nor radios for the FOO. They were, however, in a good state for the forthcoming task, and they remained in their assembly area overnight. At 7:15 on D+1, the 4-7R group went forward following 4-8 Commando's route to arrange the forward passenger lines of the 2 Commandos. Phillips wasn't very happy that 4-8 Commando had pushed on beyond their limit of exploitation. There was a healthy competition between the Commandos, and there was a level of antipathy between the 2 COs who were both strong characters. The main body of the Commando passed through 4-8 at about 9 o'clock. Ahead of them lay steep, undulating dunes with the sea on one side and the flood on the other. The Axis was also visible to the Germans on the few dry inland areas, and certainly to Whiskey 11. The Commando moved by bounds, with QNX troops forward, and there was little resistance, although a continual flow of casualties made their way back to the RAP. The Commando continued to advance until they reached an anti-tank obstacle just beyond Klein Valkenisse, which you can see on the slide. This was the landward end of the Flushing defences, which had water-filled anti-tank ditch, which finished short of the dunes, thus the reason for the land obstacle. This was the edge of Strong Point Carmen, which had to be navigated before an assault could be launched on Whiskey 11. Orders were given at 1500 hours in the area of the obstacle. Q Troop was to follow X Troop along the seaward side of the dunes and Y Troop on the landward side. Q Troop was in action only 600 yards beyond the obstacle, and 2 of their sections were caught in a mortar barrage, suffering significant casualties. The OC was also missing. The MO and OCX Troop and a stretcher party went forward to recover the casualties, but OCX Troop himself wounded, along with some of the stretcher bearers. Sergeant Isha, also wounded, gathered some Marines and assaulted the mortar line, and the Germans fled. However, all momentum had been lost. There were many casualties. The doctor was missing. When asked if mortars could register, the CO said no, as the doctor was well forward. The only course of action was to rearrange the attack on the battery. All 5 troop commanders had been wounded. Q Troop was now combat ineffective. H-hour for the attack on the battery was planned for 1700 hours. Whiskey 11 was a very big battery, with the casements and command posts sitting on top of a set of high dunes. One of the artillery pieces, Belgian, could fire to both sea and landward. At the northern perimeter, there was a searchlight position. The main guns of the battery were 150mm, but there were also 3 20mm guns and other anti-tank guns covering the seaward approaches. These and another 25 other assorted personnel and ammunition bunkers were linked by trenches, with a tough objective for 4-7 Commando. And you can see from a map of the battery how dense the number of bunkers was and how most were connected by communication trenches. Each hour was at 1700. Phillips had asked for a typhoon strike, but was told that none was available. The assault went ahead after a short barrage from south of the Scheldt. The Commando attacked on a narrow front on the landward side of the crest of the dunes, Y Troop leading with A and B following. Medium machine guns and 3-inch mortars covered the landward threat, but once again the German heavy mortars caused problems, B Troop being caught and their OC wounded. Y Troop reached the edge of the position, a searchlight platform, and exploited to the command post bunker, which was close. Resistance began to increase and darkness was approaching. ANY troops continued to fight a confused battle of cat and mouse on the position, but the commando was dispersed and vulnerable. The troops were ordered back to the area of the searchlight platform to reorganize and provide some protection to themselves. The adjutant, Captain Spencer, was sent forward to take command. The attack would have to be reorganized for first light on D+2. The night was spent bringing forward supplies and ammunition and sending casualties back to the advanced dressing station in Zoutlander. The vehicles that could get forward couldn't move beyond Zoutlander. Everything was carried across the dunes. The Germans were also busy trying to infiltrate the commando forward position on the edge of the battery and arranging a counterattack, which was beaten off. The brigade commander came forward accompanied by the CO 48 Commando. Brigadier Lester pressed Phillips to attack that night, even offering that 48 Commando should take over the assault. Inevitably, this did not go down well, and had it been agreed, would have struck a mortal blow to 47 Commando's morale. But Phillips fought his corner, and eventually Lester acquiesced and agreed, but ordered Moulton to attach a troop in support. A troop was told off for the task. Once again, Phillips asked for a typhoon strike, but none was available. Only a 15-minute barrage before H hour at 9 o'clock. 4-7 assaulted with B Troop in the lead, supported closely by A Troop and a Dutch section from 10 Commando under command of the adjutant, with X Troop providing covering fire. Q and Y troops under the 2IC covered the left flank to clear the area from which the counterattack had developed. A Troop 48 Commando provided fast support from the inland side. A and B troops with a Dutch troop under command of the adjutant attacked the first gun position, where the fighting was intense and at close quarters, but the Marines took the emplacement and pressed on. A Troop and 47, and Colonel Phillips, followed the lead troops, pressing in onto the battery. By 12:30, resistance began to crack, and the Germans started to surrender, 160 prisoners being taken. Captain Cole, who commanded the battery, offered his Luger to Colonel Phillips, suggesting that he should be shot if he hadn't done his duty. Phillips said later, "I was so relieved and delighted that I could have embraced him." The commando exploited towards Flushing, and a German position beyond Whiskey 11 was persuaded to surrender under threat of massive bombardment, and the route to the Nollagat was open. Of the 400 men that had left Ostend, 34 had been killed and 84 wounded, the highest number of men killed in action. When we left 41 Commando on D-Day, having just secured Whiskey 15 and pressing on to the lighthouse a mile beyond before being ordered to halt. At 1500s on D-Day, 41 Commando was ordered to advance. A&S troops were left under the command of 10 Inter-Allied Commando in West Capella. The remainder of the Commando, HQ, B, P, X, with Y Troop leading, advanced on Domburg. As they approached Domburg, Whiskey 17 and a smaller inland battery surrendered without a fight, and B Troop took possession of the area and the many prisoners giving themselves up. At 1815, the commando reached Domburg, some of the buildings of which were burning from early bombardment by warspite. As it was dark, the commando went firm in and around the village. This troop had been held up by a wired position on a high dune, and in the process had lost their OC, Major Bryn Sheridan, and a Marine who were missing. At 3 o'clock the next morning, A Troop were called forward, arriving at 6:30. The Germans holding up X Troop withdrew it. Was found alive. At 11 o'clock, orders were received that 41 was to hand over to 10 Commando, leaving B and X troops under command. Although the sea channel up to West Capella was now clear for minesweeping, the enemy were in some considerable strength beyond Domburg and in the area of Vera and Oost-Capella. 4 Commando were ordered across to bring their weight to bear. On D+4, 41 Commando returned to Domburg to rejoin the action. By the 5th of November, a route was opened by the engineers to enable armour and supply vehicles to come forward. And on that day, 41 Commando on the left and 10 Commando on the right launched an attack on the wooded area east of Domburg. 4-1 Commando cleared Whiskey 18, and in this assault by B and Y troops supported by the AVRE, Y Troop Commander Captain Hayden and 4 of his men were killed. This was followed on the 7th by an assault by 4-1 Commando on the area between Whiskey 18 and Whiskey 19, an area known as Black Hut. The tempo of the operations continued without rest, and on the 8th, B Troop, supported by P, took Battery Whiskey 19 in a daylight attack, surprising the garrison when they attacked across a minefield. The enemy resolve was by now dissolving, and a skillful piece of negotiation by CO4 Commando persuaded 935 Germans to unconditionally surrender, effectively ending the ground campaign on the island. During the operation, 4-1 Commando had lost 18 officers and men killed and 71 wounded. The destruction of the German positions on Walcheren was the precursor to the mine clearance operation, Operation Calendar. Under the command of Captain Hopper, operating from Terneuzen, a highly complex and dangerous operation was carried out in the Scheldt. The threat of different mines meant that it was a time-consuming and vessel-intensive task. 14 flotillas of mine hunters were needed to sweep the ground, influence magnetic and floating mines in the waterway. 229 ground mines and 38 moored mines were swept, and when after being declared a low enough risk for ships to use the waterway, mine strikes were reported, and the process had to start again. But on the 26th of November, the first 3 coasters reached Antwerp. 2 days later, on the 28th of November, the first seagoing convoy reached Antwerp, the first ship being the Fort Katariki, bottom right. The importance of the port to both the Allies and the Germans can be measured by the 21,000 tons daily average unloaded in December and the 1,214 V1 and V2s that landed on Antwerp, killing and injuring 3,000 and 12,000 civilians, respectively. But the success of the operation was a very high cost to SSDF and 4th Service Brigade and its attachments. And in a sad proscript to the operation, it was on the 8th of November that 4-8 Commando suffered the highest number of casualties when an LVT entering Sereskirke ran over a booby-trapped artillery round, which resulted in 14 dead and 12 wounded. It was a sober ending to a successful performance by 4-8 Commando. There's no doubt that the commandos performed well under very difficult circumstances. The weather, ground, and enemy combined to make it a tough operation. Nowhere in Europe had an attack been made on a coast where opposition was encountered from casemated coast guns and strong beach defences. But without extraordinary luck and the sacrifice of SSEF, subsequent analysis assessed that the commandos would not have got ashore. A significant factor in that luck was that Whiskey 13 ran out of ammunition, and subsequent operation analysis assessed that had this not been the case, the assault would have failed. But that day, luck was on the side of 4 Special Service Brigade. That completes my presentation.